All right, so I'm here today with Steve Hawks, and one of the things that I love about getting with Steve is that when you talk to Steve about a topic related to real estate, the first thing you're going to get is you're going to get everything that the guy thinks on the topic. He doesn't hold anything back. The second thing about Steve that's great is he's one of the smartest mother hubbards in our industry, and so all of the education and degrees that he's got, he's taken those and put those to practical work. And I'll tell you, some call him the doomsayer, but he tells it like it is, and it's a perspective that we need to hear. So it's great to be here today with Steve Hawks talking about what's going on in the industry, and I hope it's going to be really helpful to you. Fast forward, here we are. We just came out of August 17th. That was a big day in the real estate industry. Some biggest changes that have occurred in maybe the last 40 or 50 years in the industry. What happened. I mean, there's no more offers of compensation in the MLS, and that means a lot for the real estate industry and for real estate professionals, but it also means a lot for consumers, the sellers and the home buyers, because now there's a lot of things that need to get sorted out and dealt with in the actual offer negotiation. We're going to talk about some of that today. Another thing is that now it's required, if you're going to work with a buyer and you're a realtor, if you're a buyer and you're going to work with a realtor, you must have an agreement in place before you begin the process of looking at homes and everything that follows. And so there's a lot of changes that occurred. We're going to talk to Steve about those and kind of find out what's going on. Steve, welcome today.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. It's
Yeah,
great.
for
It's
sure.
great to hang with you, man.
Sure.
And so right out of the gate, I mean, we're just a few days into this thing. What's going on out there? I mean, what are some of the early word on the street? What's happening in the industry?
Well, you can see what's going on right now. Agents were bamboozled.
Yeah.
4 months ago, 5 months ago, they were told, don't worry, nothing's going to change. Just get this piece of paper signed, and you're going to be able to lock in that buyer. Once you get that buyer signed, you're good to go. Make sure that is down pat. Well, now they're realizing, first of all, a majority of the stuff that we were told isn't accurate. Isn't true. So are they lying to us now or are they lying to us then? I mean, concessions were supposed to be on the MLS. You were going to be able to track the concessions or offer the concessions. You're going to be able to put it on third-party websites. You're going to put it on your own website. Well, now we're learning that in the settlement it says no steering. Well, they didn't define steering good enough, so guess what? Everything I just said now is considered steering.
Possibly steering, yeah.
And calling to getting the commission is possibly considered steering.
You talk about 4 or 5 months ago. So the settlement kind of was announced 4 or 5 months ago, and this date was set out for August. And in that period of those 4 to 5 months, there were a lot of changes, a lot of adjustments. In fact, there was a lot of chaos and confusion out there. And so as we've entered into this kind of start of the thing, there's a lot of chaos.
Well, look, every buyer broker agreement class, every class on the settlement the last 4 months was wrong. Okay, the people teaching these classes, if they're not in the trenches doing the business, they shouldn't be teaching these classes. Because look, they're all wrong. They're all wrong. Every one of those classes that were taught are wrong. Not every one of them, but I'd say 99% of them, because they were either given bad information or they were interpreting the information wrong. Remember the buyer broker agreement classes where they said, oh yeah, the listing agent can email you what they're going to compensation. Oh, you're going to be able to go to their website. You're going to be able to go to a third-party website. You're going to have concessions in there. So the commission isn't going to be in there, but the concessions are. Well, where is all that?
Yeah, so the problem,
None of it's there.
One of the problems is as so many realtors and very few of them follow along for the entirety, and many of them haven't followed along at all. And so when you give them a number of pieces of information and it changes 4 or 5 times over a 3-month period, it depends on what iteration or what piece of information you last saw that determines the way you think the industry goes. And when you've got 5 or 6 different permutations, we got madness.
Well, you also have to remember where you're getting that information from. If you were a broker or company that was named in the local or national lawsuits, you're telling your agents to do certain things. You're putting extra overlays in there so that the attorneys don't come back and breach the settlement and make you come in and pay more money. So a company that wasn't named in a local or national lawsuit, they're telling their agents one thing. We just had an event where there was a top agent in town saying how she does listing agreements. Well, half the room was saying, oh, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Yes, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. What the problem is their companies won't let them do that because their attorney said, don't do that. You might breach the settlement, and then you're going to have to, they could come in and get more money from you or have more consequences. Well, that lady, she didn't work for a company that had those overlays. So that's how you're seeing all this confusion.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, not only are there were there a lot of different changes in the rules, but there's different players. And so some brokerages were part of the settlement, some are not part of the settlement. And what rules apply to each of those vary depending on where you're situated, given the different parties and the different ways that all settled out.
Right, it's the buyer broker agreement. Some companies are saying you can do this, you can lock them in. A lot of the big companies are saying, yeah, don't lock them in anymore, right? They're saying, like LVR, the buyer broker agreement allows the people to get out at any time. So a lot of companies are adopting that on a national level because they don't want any problems.
Yeah, I mean, early on, we talked about this term concessions, which is probably a bad term just because all the public needs, all the industry needs is another term to try to sort out what it means. But this idea that a portion of the closing costs, traditional seller contribution to buyer closing costs, could be reserved if the buyer wanted to cover their realtor's compensation. And that concession fee, whether it was going to go to buyer's closing costs, their actual fees of their loan or fees to buy the house from the state and escrow, et cetera, or whether it was going to pay their realtor commission, it didn't matter. But that concession was at least made public by the seller or the seller's realtor through a system or a method that let the world know. That got pulled back, and we've reserved this, I guess, almost at some of the DOJ's kind of push for the negotiation and the agreement itself. But let me ask you this. If I'm a buyer's broker and I'm negotiating my fee inside of an agreement where I'm trying to advocate for someone else, how am I doing that without jeopardizing the interests of my client for the sake of my own?
Well, that's part of what we were talking about. These new rules or policies have created more opportunities for lawyers to sue us for other practices. So a good example, we've never had this problem before. Well, in that situation, a lot of agents are now committing commercial bribery, and that's against the law. That's a criminal offense, right? Well, they didn't know this because in the past you would kind of do this for lending, but it wasn't commercial bribery because it's going to the buyer. Now, if you call a listing agent and say, "Hey, where do I want to get paid 3%? Where do I need to be?" Well, the listing agent says, "Hey, my seller wants 400. Come in with 425, and we'll get you your 3%. They want $1 million. Come in with $1,030,000, and you get your 3%." Well, you tell your buyer to come in $1,030,000, you don't share that. You could be accused of commercial bribery. You don't think these lawyers are going to come up again with us? Yeah. This settlement isn't the end. No. It's just the very beginning. And now brokers are starting to realize this. Agents are starting to realize this. Wait a minute. This isn't what we were told. This is what we were told at all. And that's why so many agents are scared, because they're not prepared. And they weren't prepared because the information they got was either lies, misrepresentations, or the people teaching them were just ignorant.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard stories where listing agents, they'll receive an offer now, and the listing agents are calling the buyer's lender to see if the buyer has the funds to pay their own realtor's commission because it's one of the terms that's been negotiated in the agreement, and the listing agent's using I need that information to negotiate this deal out. But that's confidential information, but they have no problem calling the buyer's lender to find out if they have the money to pay their own realtor's commission so they can negotiate that out in the deal.
Well, that's what they weren't thinking of. So if a listing agent asked to see the buyer's broker agreement before they show the house, no. Okay, can't do that, right? But if in the negotiation, the seller is being asked to pay for the buyer broker agreements, the seller has every right to ask to see that buyer broker agreement.
I don't
100%. It's no different than me calling the lender and go, "Hey, I want to see your closing costs. Since my seller is going to pay $10,000 towards your closing costs, I want to see the lender's closing costs to make sure there's no junk fees, so I can negotiate better for my seller." There is no different than when an offer comes in. Now, if you're not asking the seller to pay part of the buyer's broker commission, then yeah, there's no reason for the seller to ask for it. But if you're asking for it on the contract, the seller has every right to ask for that BBA.
I don't disagree. Who's got the advantage in this new world? The newer agents or the seasoned agents, or how's that going to play out? How are they being affected?
Well, I think it's the newer agents have much more advantage because they don't know how it was done in the past. Right. They're not, they weren't around when you showed a house and you got that 2.5%. That's not my opinion. NAR said the traditional buyer's commission was 2.5. They said that in Bloomberg in October. So no matter that's going to be the biggest impact, because we're already starting to see it on the high end. High end buyers are saying, or high end sellers are saying, yeah, you know what, we're not going to pay that 2.5 or 3% you asked for. We'll pay you 1. We'll pay you 1.5. That we're already starting to see that on that. The middle and low end, we haven't seen that yet. But you got to remember, it's still early. Most of the listing agreements, the sellers have already put in their head that they're paying the buyer's broker fee because it was in the old listing agreements. As we start to transition to the new listing agreements, and half of the realtors are going to say, hey, we negotiate when to come in. Half of them are still negotiating with the seller ahead of time, which I think is going to change. But that is going to be a new dynamic. And I've had more sellers Google the buyer's agent in the last week than I had the last 25 years combined.
Why is that? Why are sellers Googling buyers agents?
Because the buyer's agents are asking the seller to pay the commission.
Yeah, so they want to.
So they want to know, okay, well, I don't mind paying this person if they're knowledgeable and all that when they're asking for it. So they're seeing, okay, is this a new agent? And then listing agents are going to have to determine, hey, seller, what should you pay this buyer's agent? Well, the seller's going to ask, are they knowledgeable? Are they experienced? Am I paying a rookie?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess. I think that comes from the assumption, though, that as a seller, I want the best buyer's agent on the other side because that means, I guess, that the deal will be smoother. But why don't I want the weakest buyer's agent on the other side because they're a worse negotiator and they won't know what they're doing and they'll say yes to anything, and I can probably push them around, or my agent can push them around a lot more, and I can end up better as a seller.
Right.
I mean, don't I want to pay the weaker agent more money?
Well, no, you're actually going to see they're a weaker agent. They're going to take less, and you're going to pay them less because they haven't done any transactions.
I'm going to get my cake and eat it too.
If you haven't done any transactions, you know what? This person hasn't done any transactions. I'm not going to pay him. I know, especially on a $30,000 commission.
Well, I mean, then in effect, can sellers change the industry by if the seller only wants to make a concession of 1%, does that weaken the pool of agents that work on the buyer side of the equation? And is that a way that the sellers get an advantage in the long run?
Well, you're always going to have enough agents that I don't think there's going to be very many agents that are going to turn down a $10,000 commission.
Right. I don't disagree.
And so buyers at that level also aren't going to be as much work also.
Sure. And that just caught, like you talked about the luxury market. I mean, you talk about a $5 million house and you think about that fee. And if some agent's going to make $100,000 to $200,000 on that, and you go out and sell a $500,000 house and you make a fraction of that, tell me why that luxury home was so much more complicated and rigorous that it was a 10 times or a 10x fee. That's never made sense.
No, and the sellers are starting to realize that, especially in Southern California where there are a lot of $5 and $10 million homes. My buddy down in San Diego said, we're kind of shocked. These sellers are coming back with $500, $1,000 commissions saying, hey, you know what? If your buyer wants to pay that, let your buyer pay, because those buyers can afford to pay the commission, right? Wow. So the sellers are saying, look, we know this buyer is going to buy this house because there's not that many out there that they really like at this price range, 4 to 5 million, 10 million, whatever it is. So they're saying those buyers have the money. The buyer can pay the buyer's agent. If not, we'll sell it to somebody else.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting that the time that this change came in the industry was at a time when supply was so tight, because this plays out a little bit better when you have more houses on the market and actually true economics can play out. We kind of have a limited or restricted economic environment because the supply is so tight. We're not getting true supply-demand antics.
Correct. And when people think when the supply gets higher, that the buyer's agent's commission is going to go higher. I don't think that's going to happen, because the buyer's going to say, wait a minute, you're getting 4 or 5%? No, that's my money. Okay, so these buyer's agents are thinking, oh, well, I'm going to ask 4 and 5%. No, you're not, because the buyers are going to say, wait, that extra 3 or 4%, that was added to the price. So that's going to curb that. There's going to be a reasonable amount of commission that the buyers and seller are going to determine what that amount is.
What's going to happen? What are the new home builders? How do the new home builders play this out? I saw Pulte recently, or I guess it was one major national home builder recently, announced that they were going to cooperate. In fact, I think they might have even bumped up that to try to lure more realtors in this tough time. But are the builders taking this kind of bring your agreement and we'll talk?
Most of the
Or
builders are like, this doesn't concern us. We don't care. And most of them don't want nothing to do with it. Because they could open up to some discrimination lawsuits, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, yeah.
So the builders want nothing to do with it. They're following Zillow's lead. You know what? Nothing really changes. You want to sign an agreement, sign it. You don't. We don't care. They're taking more of a hands-off approach. There's some builders that have said they want to see it, but I think they're going to back off too when they say, oh, wait a minute, all these other builders aren't doing it. And most builders are saying, we don't care. This doesn't concern us. We're not part of NAR.
And so they're still they're still offering if you bring a buyer to our property and they decide to buy a home, then they still are cooperating or paying a fee out to realtors as they always have.
Yeah, whatever realtor writes that contract gets paid.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Right. What about referral agreements and relocation companies and some of the ancillary players that get involved? How do they get affected?
That's a big wild card because now on the buyer broker agreement, you're gonna have to disclose that. Whether it's required to or not, you see another lawsuit coming down the pipeline. If you don't disclose that you're paying some of that money that you're collecting from the buyer is going to a referral source.
Okay, so you're saying the relocation company now is because they're going to sign.
Not just relocation companies, portals, all of them.
They're all signing an agreement with that buyer to handle services for them in a move, and they're going to have you're saying their disclosures they're covered. Then they're under the rules. No, they're not. They're not covered.
No, not the companies, but the realtor they're working with.
I get it.
The realtor they're working with has to sign a buyer's broker agreement.
Of course, yes.
So wait a minute, you didn't tell me I was paying that. I'm paying you 2.5%, 3%, whatever I'm paying you. You didn't tell me, Dave, that 35% of that is going over here. If I would have known that, I would have negotiated that offer. I would have got another realtor.
Right, got it.
You told me that this was the common fee. You told me that this was the standard fee.
You're talking about the buyer and their realtor are going to have to there's a negotiation going on or a disclosure going on because of where some of that money's going.
Right, and NAR better update their policies real quick to make sure that's included in there. At their last, one of their conventions, I can't remember which one, but they had some discussion about realtors would have to disclose any party that receives money in the transaction has to be disclosed to the buyer and seller, right? So especially now with the buyer broker agreement, that's even more important. So NAR better get back to having that meeting about disclosing the referral fees that the buyers are paying, that agent, if that agent is paying out a referral fee, now we know we can track that money. It's coming from the buyer per their own buyer broker agreement rules.
No, right, absolutely. What about teams? So one of the things, the big run in the last years has been the real estate team has kind of replaced the real estate brokerage as the model for a gathering of agents to be led by one or a group of leaders in a small group. And so that worked in a time where leads didn't cost a lot and there were a lot of them and there was a lot of money to be cut up. But now that we're negotiating on the buy side and the fee's not 2.5% or 3% regularly,
that's right.
If it was that, and now a buyer's agent is negotiating that fee, how does a buyer's agent make it on a team anymore?
Well, that's a big change now because the team, when I get those leads coming in, when people get leads coming in, they can't know for sure that how much they're going to get paid on those leads. They can say, oh, well, in the past, I gave you 10 leads off this listing, 40% are going to convert. It's a $400,000 buyer that sooner or later in the next 90, 120 or 12 months, I'm gonna bring home, half of 2.5%, right? Well, that 2.5% guarantee is over, number one. Number two, what if they're competing against another realtor that's doing it for 1.5 or 2%? Right. And that realtor at 1.5 is going to make more than that team member at 2.5.
Right. The team members are at a huge disadvantage.
Now they are, correct.
Because now we're in a price war.
Yes.
I mean, for a while, this will be a price war because there are too many realtors that just lived on the benefit of a listing agent that took care of what they were going to make. And now that that's gone, that the listing agent no longer does that work for them, and they don't know what they're doing. Like I just had a story to tell you. a woman, a listing agent. She gets a call on one of her listings. I want to see your property. I represent myself. I don't have an agent. I'm just calling listing agents. Shows up, wants to buy the house. He says, will you write it up? She goes, well, yeah, but we need to get an agreement because I charge a fee to do that. And he said, I'm not paying a fee. And so she said, well, you can go get your own realtor. And so we found a realtor to write the agreement for $3,000. And so the agreement gets accepted. And so she calls up this realtor to say, when are we going to schedule the inspection? He goes, don't know. That's your problem and the buyer's problem. She goes, well, wait a minute. You're the agent. Yeah, I was only the agent. I made $3,000 to write the offer. That was the scope of my duties. He's on his own for the rest of the way.
Right.
And there's an example of how the real estate, that's just an example of how it's playing out. So he found a realtor and for $3,000 thought that's all he needed. And now he'll handle the appraisal and the inspection and the loan and all of the other things. But those deals fall apart.
Well, that listing agent
Probably should have wrote the deal.
Wrote the deal, and guess what? $3,000 is time. Money is time. So a lot of these listing agents are saying, well, I'm not going to write unrepresented, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's going to happen. And then the listing agents go, you know what? It's much easier for me just to do it myself.
Yeah. So, well, here's the thing. Until this mindset changes, and this I think is that story is reflective of a mindset that is so ingrained that our time is worth a lot of money. I mean, we know what it takes to sit down and fill out that offer and negotiate that offer. And if I'm going to get paid $3,000 to do that, and I could get a regular flow of those deals coming, that'd be my career.
Right.
I'd take that job. Hell yes, I'll write offers for $3,000 an offer. But there you go. But that person's position was on no 2%. On a $600,000 property, which was $12,000, they thought that they were worth 4x that to write that offer.
Right.
And you know what? The deal doesn't happen. Their seller's upset at them because the deal doesn't happen. They're back to the market spending more of their own money marketing the property.
And time.
And they could have been under contract, their fee plus this additional fee. And that would have, I think, been the way the world was supposed to go.
Yeah. So the first 3 to 6 months, I think the buyer commission is going to stay how it's been, as people just keep on writing that up, except in the higher end luxury, because we're already seeing that come down. A lot of luxury sellers are saying, no, I ain't paying that, okay?
Right.
That's already coming down. But the 600, 800 and below is pretty much staying at this time at the 2.5.
Same range that it's been
Same
around.
range, right? That is going to change as we talk about it, because people are going to try and milk it for as long as they can, and they're going to say, you know what? I'm on this team. I think I can make more money doing it for 1.5.
Well, right. I get it on my own.
And then they're going to start advertising 1.5. That's just a matter of time. We're already starting to see companies do it. Then you're going to see mortgage companies come in and say, listen, we could close 100 more deals a month if we just had a realtor on salary and just use the buyer's commission for closing cost.
Well, imagine that. They still went right out of the realtor playbook. It's called a showing assistant.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden the related industries can go get their showing assistant, because if that's what a buyer needed from a team's perspective, or a buyer's agent or an agent that was too busy, my showing assistant will show you the houses and then I'll just handle all the other details. Well, you know what? There's companies that they can hire just like a realtor can.
Right.
They can outsource transactional work.
And people are talking about, well, I'm worth this much. I'm value. This is my value. Well, guess what? Your value may not be needed on that transaction.
Well, that's just it.
Steve, I just want to see this one house, okay? I just want to see this one house. Or I just want to see these 3 houses in this neighborhood. That's the only 3 I'm going to buy. I don't need your 25 years experience and your 5,000 houses sold. I don't need that experience. I don't need that value. So I'm not going to pay you, this crazy amount of money. This is what I'm going to pay you because I don't need your value. I don't need that information.
Right.
It's like if I'm going from my office to the Strip, do I need a limousine at $100 an hour?
Yeah,
no.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And that's been the message, though. I don't care. It's not just NAR's message. It's not just the broker's message. It's all these top real estate trainers. The message that they're selling out, as long as you know your value and you can share your value, you'll be fine. Well, you know what? The assumption is that the person on the other side of the table wants all that value.
Right.
If you have 5 value points and I only want this one.
Right.
Do I pay you 20% of what that fee was?
Right.
I didn't need values 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Right.
And so the question that I wanted to really get to is, I sit down with you at the buyer's consultation and I say, all right, here's our agreement. And I'm going to go out and help you find that home. And it sounds like you want a 4-bedroom house and you want a 3-bath house. And we talked about the price point. And ooh, Steve, it's a very competitive price point in town. That's going to be one that a lot of people are going to want houses. And so because of that, you want a very competitive price point. My fee's going to be this. Now, if you'd have wanted one where there was no competition, is it going to be fee based on the scope of the project? And how do you determine that as we sit here before we even get started of what my fee would be as your buyer's broker?
Well, that's the problem with these buyer-broker agreements. They want you to determine a fee based on that person that you
Not-
don't know if they're going to be a lot of work or
Right.
little work.
We could go out in the first house they see, if they say I take it,
Right.
and the seller rolls over and in 10 minutes you're under contract and they close all cash in 3 days. Was that worth $20,000?
Right.
I don't know.
No, and the buyer's going to renegotiate it, saying, hey, you didn't explain this to me, number one. And number two, you made me sign this contract in order to see this house. I wouldn't have signed this contract unless you said I had to sign it to see this house. And so you're going to have a lot of different scenarios. First-time home buyer, how much you going to charge them? Repeat clients, how much you going to charge them? So when they call you, Steve, I bought 3 houses for you, 4 houses, I just want to see these. Repeat clients. So in the old days, that never came up. Boom, I'm getting my 2.5 or 3. Yeah, I'll show you a house. First time home buyers, I'm getting my commission that's paid. I already know an internet lead. So you meet somebody at the house. Okay. Now, in the old days, 2.5% was guaranteed. Well, a lot of times, a lot of these internet leads, these teams and these coaches were taught, act like you're the listing agent. Yeah. So now, these buyer's agents, if they're going to act like they're the listing agent, they meet them at the house. In the old days, you showed them the house, procuring cost, boom, you got your 2.5%.
You wrote the offer and you were fine.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Now you write the offer. The buyer's going to go, wait a minute, why are you charging me this 2.5? First of all, you lied to me.
Yeah.
You're not the listing agent. You don't work for the listing agent. You don't know the listing agent. You know what? You can write this up. I'm giving you $1,000, or I'm giving you 1%, or I'm giving you $500. If not, I'm going to get my own guy, or I'm going to call the listing agent direct because you lied to me.
Yeah. I mean, remember the line that brokers used to tell realtors. Well, the buyer would come and they'd say, well, you know what, I see that property that I can see right there that the sellers they're cooperating 3%. I need one of those points toward my closing costs.
Right.
Oh, no, we can't pay any. It's illegal for us to pay any of the commission to you. We can only pay it to another broker, and that's the law.
Yeah.
And that was the line that kept that quote
The lie.
negotiation
Right.
from happening.
Right.
Well, that negotiation is going to happen. It should happen in every transaction.
Right.
When as a buyer, once I settle an agreement with you, I should be able. Is the seller cooperating and at what level? Because I want to know that. Because if I'm willing to pay you, then I'm going to have I'm going to take all that money from the seller.
Right. And what happens when a neighbor calls on one of your listings now and wants to see the house? Yeah. That was a guaranteed 2.5 before. Now, not going to happen. Yeah. Very, very few. And as time goes by and buyers and sellers educate themselves more on what's going on, and we have more companies that come in and start, going for that market share. Like when these mortgage companies, I just got an email from one of my mortgage companies, the servicing company said, hey, use our agent. They only charge you 1%. And when you use our mortgage company, we'll give you another 1 point back if you use us for the loan.
Well, right. I mean, absolutely. Now that's another interesting topic because the relationship between the realtor and the lender was one of synergy and collaboration. And now that relationship may be turned on its head because now we're fighting over the same money. The buyer needs that money to make that loan and get to that payment that works. That same money the seller's offering to maybe me as the broker. And so now the lender wants that money to go to the buyer's benefit so they can get the loan and the loan will happen. But that's my money. That's the only way I get paid is if the seller has that money because they don't have any extra money, lender. Don't you realize that?
Right.
And now I'm pitted against my lender or against my own client. And my lender becomes almost my adversary.
Right. Well, no, I just did a talk on that. Our lending partners are no longer our lending partners. Yeah. They're our lending competitors for the concession. So just like you said, the sellers are going to say, hey, this is what I want to net. If they need $30,000 for a cost, here's the $30,000. They can divvy it up how they want. So now you got to get a lender that doesn't charge extra hard. Before you didn't care because the commission's already baked in. So now you're going to have to work with a settlement-friendly lender that knows how to work and cut cost, because that concessions is coming out of your pocket now, your commission. And who's more important to the transaction, the loan officer or the realtor?
Yeah, well,
You can get the house without the realtor. You can't get the house without the loan officer, and else it's cash, right?
Yeah.
So that right there. So who's going to have to take the hit to close the deal? The agent.
So out there, Steve, in the years of that I've known you, and when I talk about Steve Hawks and what does Steve Hawks think, because I just it matters to me. A lot of times I hear, Steve Hawks, he's got doom, he talks doom, he just sees the unhappy side of things, and so just for those folks out there that probably aren't watching anyway because it's us. But in case they chimed in and they were going to watch a minute, what can we tell realtors today? I mean, we talk about a lot of the problems. We talk a lot about the chaos and the confusion, and NAR's tripped here, and the attorneys are waiting and pray there, and there's a lot of stuff still to shake out. But if it's end of August 2024 and I'm a realtor and I'm on the seller side, let's start on the seller side. What the F do I need to be thinking about? What do I need to be doing? What do I not need to be doing until NAR and my broker and the industry figures this out? Well, what are my best decisions or thoughts right now?
First of all, you got to get the truth. Like Tony Robbins says, you can't have think positive and ignore reality, because you're going to fail. Right. And that's why all the agents are scared. They're not prepared because they lived in this la-la land that everything is going to be okay. Don't worry about it. Just think positive. Just think the settlement's positive. Well, how did that work out for you? How did that positive thinking work out for you? No, you got to look at reality, have a positive mindset at all time. But just because something's negative doesn't mean you can't take advantage of it. And exactly what's going on right now. Look at all these agents that were scared and shocked at what's going on right now. Well, we told you this 4 months ago. We told you to do your research. You didn't do your research. You have to do your research so you can make an educated decision. And now I think a lot of agents are learning the hard way. Oh, you know what the coach told me wasn't true. What my broker told me wasn't accurate. Yeah. And now I'm going to have to dig in deep and find out what to really do. Well, now we're on a truly free market. What is the value? They've been taught all these years, like you said, no value. Well, what is value? How did I teach value? None of these coaches show them how to bring value. They don't explain it. You're not going to have to go in there, and you're going to have to find the loopholes, like I did in the past with the MLSs and when they blocked commissions. You're going to have to go and find out, what can you do different than any other realtor right now? What can you do different based on all this stuff going on right now? This is like a big reset button for all the realtors. So you got to look and find out what you can do different and get ahead of the curve. And you can take advantage of what's going on right now because most agents are in turmoil. And if you think you're going to do business the old way, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to learn how the new trends are, what the sellers are doing. But most importantly, you're not going to be able to do one canned script. You're going to have be on your toes, and you're going to have to be knowledgeable on 6 or 7 different scenarios, minimum, like the ones we talked about.
Yeah. Does it make most? So if I'm a listing agent, and of course, if my seller client wants to offer a fee because they know that lures buyers, brokers to bring their clients to my house, then I'm going to want to do that, and I'm going to want to get that advertised for them as many places as I can, just not through the MLS. But if that's something that the seller wants, they want that pushed, because that's one of their marketing levers, just like a flyer is a marketing lever.
Well, depending on what company you work for, the seller's going to have to do that, because if you start advertising the commission on your listings on behalf of them, you got to remember, why did you offer a 3% over here in this area and a 2% in this area?
So that's it. But so that
and that's why these brokers are in panic mode right now.
Right. So
you put us in a situation.
So that solves one situation, which was what the settlement drove. But what you're saying is, when I play by that game, then all of a sudden I've got to answer to somebody else down the road that says, well, why'd you charge that person X and that person X plus 1 or X minus 1? And then you've got a potential discrimination case. And we some of the other cases that have kind of already played out over these last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, just in the last 3 years, there's cases we've talked about the precedent already on that. But also, they didn't define steering in the settlement. This is why people are so confused.
Well,
what you just said, if I put the commission out there for my seller that says, hey, we'll pay a 3%, bring your buyers, Is that staring? Well, according to most of these attorneys that are involved in the settlement, yes, that's staring. You can't do that. Well, you should have defined the word
Yeah.
staring before you told all these agents to agree to it.
It's another bad word, because when you decide that you should show them these 4 houses versus the other 14 that you could have shown them, you steered too. You might have picked them not on reasons based on commission or self-interest, but steering happens. I mean, the process of guiding someone through the choice or through the process of choosing a home has to have some steering in it. Otherwise, what guide are you?
Yes, maybe in the old days, but the new days, the buyers are saying, listen, I'm going to find these houses. How many times do agents get this? You'll send them all you want on the MLS. Hey, I found this on Zillow. Can we go see it? So we're not really
You're right.
guiding them as much as we used to.
What they want to see. You're right. But there's a lot of questions that we try to help them answer based on the questions we ask them to learn about what's important to them, to try to say, oh, I think they'd like that neighborhood versus that neighborhood based on what they told me on last Saturday. And that right there, based on we think on their preference or choice or what their wish would be, we're moving in a direction that's something better for them. But at some level, that's just steering.
Correct, but it's not steering for
in an illegal way. I understand.
Yeah, and we talk about sellers. If you want to get a lot of these coaches and brokers are saying, hey, if the sellers offer more commission, they're going to get more buyers. Well, that's not true. Because if that was true, every builder would be offering a 4% commission.
Right.
And some builders don't pay anything.
Yeah.
So to say if the seller offers a higher commission, then you're going to get more buyers through is false. And in this new era, if you offer a higher commission to the buyer's agent, the buyers are going to know now, because the buyer's broker agreement, they're going to know. And the buyers are going to say, oh, this seller's offering 3 or 4% or 5%. They must be desperate.
Well, right, absolutely, and
because they are.
But they'll also be interested in that number, because if that's being offered, they'll have their hand out for whatever overage that exists over and above the agreement they just negotiated with their realtor. I mean, think about that. If I want to buy a Lennar home tomorrow, or major builder B's home tomorrow, and I saw a commercial, or I saw a flyer that said they were offering realtors 5%. Why wouldn't I be calling up tomorrow if I wanted to buy that home and finding a realtor and saying, hey, I want to go buy this home. I need you to write an offer. I'll pay you 1% and go get 4 points to buy down my rate and off my closing costs. That's going to happen. So the builders, I think, are going to steer clear of that, because that'll backfire.
Well, not only that, if I see a builder giving 5%, what else do I know?
Well, right, they're desperate, but
what else do I know? Hey, they're selling this house for $600. Yeah, but guess what? We're not going to offer $600.
You and I know
we're going to offer a lot more.
You and I know that, but the average consumer doesn't. I mean, it's weird that they don't figure that shit out, but the average consumer doesn't usually figure that stuff out. Like, you come with that.
It depends on what average consumer. Average first-time home buyer? No. Average buyer that's buying a second or third time? Yes. Because the builders they say that on the builders a lot, right? So now when they see that a seller is offering a higher commission, what's wrong with the house? Why are they offering a higher commission? Well, if they're offering a higher commission, they're desperate, so let's lowball them. So now a seller has to think, wait a minute, if I'm offering a higher commission than everybody else, is it going to get me lower offers? Because now the buyers are going to think, oh, wait a minute.
But the buyer's realtor doesn't want to go in and use that lever, because then that probably causes their commission to become chopped.
Depends on what realtor, right? Depends on what realtor. If you're a solo agent and you're gonna get a 2 or 3% and you don't have to make a split, you don't care. If you're on a team and you got to hit a 50-50, then yeah, that's gonna be a big deal.
One of the things that and I think that some of this, you've already alluded to it, but a lot of the dumbing down of this kind of settlement is because it's too complicated for 80% of the realtors, perhaps. And yet NAR needs the 80% to stay realtors, because those paying dues of that 80% is what's keeping them afloat. And so there's somewhat of a conflict, because really this change should have probably eliminated a lot more realtors than it's going to, because they're just folks that aren't equipped perhaps to deal with the complexities that this new world brings. But that's not what brokers want. That's not what the agencies, what the organizations want, because their revenue is so tied to membership. But if I'm a seller and I'm a seller's realtor and I'm a seller, is it best right now to just kind of take this position that has been kind of put out there, which is, hey, we're open to talking about a buyer's fee, but you should just make that part of your offer? Is that what you're seeing? And is that kind of the recommended path that sellers and sellers realtors kind of move at this stage?
Yeah, it depends what part of the country you're on and what company you're working for, right? Because our MLS has the commissions on the contract. So yeah, just write it on the contract. Here's another pitfall. I call you, ask you what the buyer's commission's going to be, and you tell me 2.5%. Well, I send the offer over and ask for 3.
Yeah.
Well, now you pissed off the seller. Didn't you tell this guy 2.5? Well, why is he doing this? You know what? Counter back at 1 or 1.5.
Yeah.
And then the agent goes, hey, I thought you said, well, yeah, what? I told you 2.5. You asked for 3. Now the
Made him
seller's
mad.
doing, yeah. And then that call is a waste of time. Hey, you told me the commission was 2.5.
It doesn't matter
Yeah,
what I
but that
told
was
you.
at list price.
No, I get it. It's the call is irrelevant. In
Worthless.
fact, the call's actually probably to your detriment
100%.
because if you rely on it and there's nothing in writing, it pulls the rug out from under you, then you're caught off guard.
Even if there is something in writing.
Well,
We talked about this early. Even if is something in writing, that doesn't help you at the MLS board. You got to try and take that to the court.
Well, you'd
and
have to
no
go sue
judge
the
or jury's
seller.
gonna.
You'd have to sue the seller. You'd have an agreement with the seller.
No, you would have to sue the agent because the seller's going to say no. The agent.
Didn't tell you right.
The agent didn't tell you right.
But maybe the agent had the authority to step into the shoes of the seller and make a representation on behalf of the seller.
They better have it in writing.
It used to be that would cause the agent to be bit in the butt, but now that might bite the seller in the butt in that scenario.
Yeah, in the commission.
Could bite the seller in the butt.
So it doesn't make.
What about buyer's agents? So now I'm a buyer. We talked a little bit about sellers, or a lot about sellers agents. Now I'm a buyer's agent, and I'm going to sit down with my buyer, and I got an agreement to put together, and Mr. Buyer, here's this agreement, and it says I'm going to represent you, and I'm going to bring you a lot of value. Remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And so here's my fee, and it's 3%. What? So you're recommending against a set fee determined at the outset, because how in the world could you know what your fee's going to be?
Well, not only that, the way the buyer-broker agreement is set right now, where you're telling the person, this is how much I'm going to charge you, these brokers are starting to realize, oh, wait a minute, this is going to set us up for a discrimination lawsuit.
Right.
And we have the precedent. There was a portal that was just sued and lost in one of the big real estate
They
companies.
settled.
Because they were given the rebates weren't the same to everybody. Well, yeah, that house was $1 million. This house was $200,000. How could it? It doesn't matter. Fannie Mae just had a lawsuit where similar situations. So if you're charging this person 2.5 and this person 1.5, well, why?
Yeah. Well, because their deal was a lot more complicated.
Well, that's not what these government agencies want to hear. That's not what they don't care, and we already have precedents for it. And what happens when it goes even farther, right? So don't forget, it's not just the agents, it's the whole brokerage. So if a broker has this agent that's doing 2.5 in this area, and this one's doing 1.5 in this area, or 1%, well, that broker's responsible for all those. So we know that some government agency, some lawyer's going to come in and say, look, my client was charged 2.5. All these people were charged 2.5, where these people paid 1.5.
Yeah.
Even if you on the buyer's broker agreement, if you put 3% or 2.5 for everybody, okay, you know what? We're gonna take care of that everybody. Well, then you have the attorneys going, oh, there you go again, colluding. Well, now if you send over an offer and you get countered at 1.5%, you're still gonna you're gonna reduce that commission to 1 or 1.5. You're still charging them less. So there's another situation, and we know what's gonna happen. Highly likely, right? In 3 to 5 years, once they start making money again, you're going to have another government agency, another group of attorneys say, look at those realtors. There they go again. Now they're discriminating, and they're going to come in and they're going to do just like they did with the loan officers. Hey, you know what? You guys can charge whatever you want, but here's the deal. You charge 1, 2, 3, whatever you want, but you can only you have to charge everybody the same amount. So if you're a realtor, just like the loan officers, when they did this to loan officers, your compensation package charge the same amount for this period of time. If you want to raise it or lower it, when the time comes up, when your period comes up, then you can adjust it.
And it wasn't percentage based; it was fee based. Is that correct?
On the lenders, I don't know how.
I
I think they did it on a point, but for the realtors, most likely it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you want to charge.
Points again.
Yeah.
So that if the loan was a higher amount, the point would be a higher dollar, but it would be a 1 point, not changed to 1 to 2 to 1.5, depending on the deal that week.
Correct. It would be like if you want to charge 1 point on the loan,
Yeah.
you charge everybody a point, whether it's $1 million or $100,000, right?
In fact, they'll probably your fee schedules probably have to be filed with the state or the Nevada Real Estate Division, and every quarter you have to adjust those with them, because there has to be some place where this consumer can go after the fact, short of a litigation. There has to be some.
Well, it's the same kind
consumer
of government
protection.
agencies that are looking at the mortgage companies.
It'll be the CF
It's going to be 10 times easier to regulate us because it's one piece of paper. We put it in the PDF, and you send it off to the real estate division or the new agency that's going to monitor our commissions. It's super easy to track. This is why the buyer broker agreement should be a range, or it should be like Zillow's. I mean, why? It's not a coincidence that Zillow doesn't have commission on their, quote, buyer broker agreements. Zillow's smart. On their touring agreements, it says nothing about commission, so they can't be blamed for nothing. Zillow is very smart. So 2 to 3 years, when these discrimination lawsuits likely come in, right, highly likely, maybe 3 to 5 years, but everyone I've talked to, the broker, like, oh, I never thought about this. Yeah, your attorneys never told you this?
So in the Zillow, so that you're talking about a Zillow agent that works with the buyer. There's in that agreement that they're going to sign. You're talking, is this that showing agreement that
Yeah,
Zillow
there's
made
no commission
available?
on there. Zillow's no.
But that is not the agreement that Zillow intends that a Zillow realtor would represent a buyer in the transaction. That was just a preliminary, hey, we don't have to have this formal agreement, just a showing. We have to have an agreement. It'll be I'm going to show you houses and there's no fee at this point. When you decide to hire me the next day or the next week, then we would fill out a formal agreement.
No, the Zillow form is not compliant with the settlement.
I
You're
understand.
supposed to get it signed
Yes.
with the commission amount before you show the house. But Zillow knows, wait a minute here. They're smart enough to realize, wait a minute, if we start putting commissions on our showing agreements, on these BBAs, if we start doing this NAR policy, we're going to put ourselves in jeopardy of future lawsuits. And do you think NAR is going to sue Zillow for not complying with it? No. Those agents are not using a form that is compliant with the settlement.
Okay.
There's nothing in the settlement that says, hey, you can show this one house and then charge later. No. It specifically says the first house.
But why? Right. But I can have that first house, and in that agreement, that Zillow agreement, it says the fee is 0. And so it does call out the fee. It says it's nothing.
But it's not. There's no fee. It has to have a fee in there. It has to be compliant.
Well, but the fee being 0 is a fee.
Nothing. You have to specifically put what you're going to charge on there.
Okay. And for this portion of our relationship, I am charging you nothing.
Then that realtor can be that realtor has to agree to that 0 on anything in the future.
Well, I don't know about that. No, NAR's even come out and said that I can modify my agreement. This is the truth. This is truth, in my opinion. I can meet with you and sign an agreement, and we can decide that the range of services, I can just say my fee's 2%, and we can agree on that at the start of our relationship. You're the buyer, I'm the buyer's broker. And we go out and we look at a house, and they're offering 5 points, and it's your dream house, and you're so happy I found it. You say, you know what, David? You found the right house, and they're offering 5%. Let's redo my agreement. I want to pay you 5%. Get all of that fee. You deserve it. That's okay. I can sign an agreement with that buyer. Now, what buyer is going to want to give that 3 points to me versus take it for themselves? So how many buyers are going to want to go down that path? But there's nothing that stops the realtor from saying, Mr. Hawks, the seller's offering 5%. We agreed on 2%. If you'd be willing to agree to 5%, then I could get all of that money that the seller's willing to pay a realtor like me to bring you to the house. And that buyer, I don't say it, but if you don't, the extra would just go to you, to your closing costs. And that buyer signs that agreement's okay. Now you can talk about whether the buyer was disclosed later, but that agreement can be made subsequently per NAR policy clarifications.
They have to cancel out the previous BBA and do a new one.
I know.
Per the settlement, you cannot get paid more than your BBA. So if you want to use that Zillow BBA, the buyer can say, no.
I know.
I'm going back to my original one.
My thinking on that, Steve, was here's what I thought Zillow was doing. And so I'm just going to give you a different thought on that. When Zillow came out with that form, I thought it was genius at the moment because I said, not they're trying to avoid the trip up that's going to come with the discrimination, but this gets the buyer safely in my control, and I'm out showing them a couple houses, and I've satisfied the an agreement part of the NAR settlement. And so now I get a chance to build rapport with the buyer. I'm in person with them looking at 2 or 3 houses. They have no obligation to me. Every other realtor that's demanded that they sign a form, then that we negotiate commissions, they didn't want to sign that shit. They just wanted to go see 2 houses. And my Zillow agreement allows them to do that. We've connected. They say they want to keep looking at houses, and they say, you seem to be just fine. And I say, well, now, if you want to actually procure me to be your realtor, to not just see these 2 houses, but to see more houses and to write an offer and to negotiate it and to help you to the closing, well, here's this agreement. This is my new agreement that's now deals with these additional services, and that's 2.5%. That's what I thought Zillow was doing by bringing the initial agreement out, because it was a way for the Zillow-friendly agents to hook in buyers at that first stage. And then you had a much better chance to get them under an agreement than, hey, Steve, you want to look at a house? No problem. Let's sign an agreement that says you're going to pay me 3%. Well, I just want to see a house, David. I don't even know if you're if you're even a realtor. I mean, you said you were, but I'm not want to sign anything yet. And that's why I thought that.
Yeah, I
do you think it might be about this other problem?
Yeah, because originally Zillow was going to put a fee on.
Yeah, I know that.
The Zillow form being used right now is not compliant with the settlement. You have to have a compensation on there.
Yep.
0 or nothing is not compensation. Okay, so if I have you, if that's the case, then I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to do this for free.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this for pro bono, so I don't need to have this signed. So, and they're only using it in 24 states. And NAR has not come out and said they approve or disapprove of it. So if NAR is silent, then obviously they approve it. Well, if they're not going to enforce the settlement for them, then you know what? Agents don't have to do it either. You can't pick and choose what you enforce.
Yeah. All right. So that's cool. So a little bit about what we do for a buyer's agent, what we do for a seller's agent. Get a little bit of insight out there. I mean, there's a lot still to play out on this topic. I'm not even sure the quote experts really have a handle on what's going on.
There are no experts, because the experts that agree to this settlement, people are looking at it like going, now wait a minute, everything you told us and we could do and agree to is not accurate. Nothing.
Yeah. Everything
we talked about has not happened.
Yeah, I know. The thing that's so interesting is that the world thinks that this guy Michael Ketchmark is this brainiac behind all of this solution, but the real power law firms, the big players, I mean the legitimate, they were in these other lawsuits that never got played out.
They didn't present their case.
They never even got to present their case.
NAR didn't want that information to get out, but they're waiting and they're going, you know what? The reason why they did this settlement the way they did, in my opinion, and I think it's starting to come out, is the attorneys are like, you know what? We don't want these guys filing BK against us. So we're going to take this little money, $419 million, because it was a $5 billion case, right? We'll take $419 million. We'll take $50 million here, $40 million here. We'll throw them in a 7-year settlement. We know they're going to breach it, so let's get our money. And then 2 to 3 years, we're going to go back and hit them hard. And then if they want to file BK, go ahead. Because the data and information that those big attorneys have is damning. And I know some of it. You know some of it. I mean, blocking commissions on MLSs, and they have all that, right? And another lawsuit we got to look out, we can talk about next time, is that Homey lawsuit.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Yeah,
that could force the DOJ to, oh, you know what, NAR, separate now, realtors and MLSs are completely separate. So they better take care of this real quick.
Right. Well, I think that's coming. I mean, I think that realtors and MLSs, that almost has to be separated. That's the only way that this can play out, because the club that's been formed, if you will, over these last 50, 70, 90 years is pretty tight. And just from talking to like the folks at the MLS, how many realtors are still trying to do things like put a picture, the front picture of the house has a 3, the front door has a 3 on it, and all the little tricks. I mean, this group is thick-headed, and there's more coming. They're not open to to change.
No, and hey, all these local attorneys that didn't get paid because of the settlement, they're going to go do these secret shoppers on all these companies that were named in the local lawsuit, and they're going to try and get them to breach so they can get some money. Because these local attorneys, there's 30 or 40 copycat lawsuits. Well, none of those attorneys didn't get paid.
Right.
And you're talking about Kirchfield. These realtors now have a target on their back. That's why we're seeing so many realtors. Attorneys would never in the past, they'd say, you know what, I'm not going to sue the realtors. They're too powerful. We're not going to win. Well, now it's the complete opposite. Now they're looking at Kirchfield and go, wait a minute, that guy, a personal injury attorney, a guy that had no experience at all, a personal injury attorney wins $5 billion. Now every attorney is going to go after NAR, every realtor association. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. So it's like the 4-minute mile, right? And when that guy ran the nobody thought they could run the 4-minute mile. He runs the mile in 4 minutes, and all of a sudden,
8 people do it that same
boom,
year.
boom, 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 boom. And now, everyone does it. Same thing was going on with the real estate and NAR right now. There was just in the last 48 hours, there's 2 major lawsuits against NAR.
Yeah.
One for the boycott, one for the fraud.
Yeah, it's on the gates are about to open.
Yeah.
There's a lot more lawsuits coming against people. I mean, wait till local brokerages start suing local associations that it's not NAR or state level, that it's at the local level.
Yes.
It's
yes.
coming.
Well, it already happened in Michigan, Sotheby's in Michigan. And that's exactly what you said. That's going to start snowballing because, what you were talking about before, that we thought more realtors were leaving. Thousands of realtors are leaving. The thing is, they're being replaced.
Right.
So we're going to lose hundreds of thousands of realtors, but they're going to replace with hundreds of thousands new ones that will adapt to this and say, hey, you know what? I'm working 60 hours a week, making 60, 70 grand a year. I can work 40 hours a week doing this real estate thing and make 120 at 1% a deal. I'm in.
No, I get it. I said this, and I'm gonna one more topic, but I said this to some of my agents recently. I said, hey, go to Glassdoor and tell me what an associate attorney makes in their first year out of 3 years of law school and taking the bar. I said, we're not talking 6 figures. We're still in the 5 figures. Yes. And you're telling me that a $75,000, you wouldn't take a $75,000 a year job. Well, you know what? Go to law school for 3 years and dig $150,000 to $200,000 debt, pass a bar, and go out and work for $75,000 a year as an attorney. Right. And tell me about you wouldn't be a realtor for 75. I'm sorry, but there's going to be some changes in the industry, and it is no longer a $250,000 job if you just show up and smile.
Right.
All right, so here's the last thing. We got a couple minutes. The country's changing, and so it's been going on, and we're reading into the national media. The prices have slowed down and actually are declining in many parts of the country. Inventory's growing, like Austin, Texas, I read. Inventory was down in the 2,500. Now it's over 10, 12, 14,000 units. And so the word on the street is that the national real estate market is turning to a buyer's market. But Las Vegas, that's not the case. And so but just before we leave today, just kind of a couple of insights from you. It's one of my passions to talk about the market. What is your thoughts about what's the local market and what's propping it and what's the future? And then chat a little bit about this insurance thing we were talking about.
Yeah, so what's going on in Texas right now is healthy. They built a lot. So yeah, prices are coming down. They've come down about 20%, I think, in Austin, but they're still elevated. They're still too high, right? And the Florida, we're seeing a lot of inventory skyrocketing in these other areas. Well, that's good because it's going to bring down the cost, right? That's supposed to happen. You're supposed to have a recession. You're supposed to have a real estate crash because guess what? How many people in Vegas would be homeowners today if it wasn't for the crash of 2008, 2009?
Oh, yeah.
How many people are in a house right now that can't afford the house today?
Couldn't afford it.
80% of the people in Vegas could not afford their house. The house they're in right now. Maybe
90%. That's a stat. Yeah. Over 80% of people couldn't afford the median price of a house based on the incomes they make today if they had to buy a house right now.
There you go. And if the houses dropped 20% and the interest rates dropped 2 points, they still wouldn't be able to afford it.
Yeah. Well, Vegas is unique, and it's. The landscape's changing dramatically.
Yeah, and if you want to know what's going to happen in Vegas, it's very easy. As long as you got those idiots in California with those horrible policies, they're not building homes in California. The largest multifamily developer just left California. How does that impact Vegas? Well, if they're not building enough residential units in California. Where they're going to come? They're going to come here.
Yeah.
The number one place for Los Angeles to come is Las Vegas. Wait, I just sold a $1.2 million house in Los Angeles. Not me. A buyer says, I just sold this $1.2 million house in Las Vegas or in LA that I bought 30 years ago for $100,000, or 50 years ago my parents bought it for $15,000.
Yeah.
I got 1.2 million. I'll come to Vegas. So they're coming to Vegas, putting the money down, getting a job, and their payment, they can afford a $60,000, $70,000 job and afford a $600,000, $7,000 house because they're going to put down $300,000 or $400,000.
But wait until, so it's a locked-in effect that's being created on top of a locked-in effect because they aren't moving.
Well, it's just like if you want to see Las Vegas real estate, just look at California 20 years ago, 10 years ago. We're having the same impact. People they're getting here and nobody's selling their houses because they can't. Yeah. They can't find that. And now we're seeing people. I've had so many calls in the last 3 to 4 months of people wanting to sell their house that bought their house in the last 6 to 24 months. Well, they can't afford the house anymore, and they can't sell it because it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Insurance is destroying people out here right now. Yeah. If you have a house, what else do you have besides house insurance? Car insurance. The insurance crisis in Vegas is really the biggest threat, and it's going to impact home values too. So.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Well, listen, this has been great. Thank you again. It's great. We ought to do this more often.
Yeah, we're going to get part 2. We didn't even cover up most of this stuff.
Yeah, I know. We'll get together again. We'll do it soon.
And we're going to see so much change in 30 to 60, 90 days. The topics are going to be...
I'm looking forward. I hope, doing that event, we talked to John Hawk, it was 5 months ago.
Yeah.
It's time for him to get everybody back together and kind of talk about, because so much has changed since we sat in that room with him and talked about the future home sales. It's going to be a big deal. So, thank you. And I hope this has been helpful. I think that there's a lot of great insight. The market, the industry, the world is changing, and keep your head above water and keep breathing. Have a great day.